A very warm welcome from the Global South Women's Forum on Sustainable Development. This is Rachel Ong, your technical host for this session. To maximize the bandwidth for all participants, we kindly request that participants switch off your videos and mute your microphones. Please also close any unnecessary programs if you are experiencing slow bandwidth. Please also note that you are very welcome to use the public chat box to engage with one another during the session. This session is live streamed and the recording will be made public on the ERO Asia Pacific YouTube channel afterwards. We are very committed to making sure that this is an inclusive and safe digital space. Please note that we will remove participants who engage in disruptive behavior without prior notice. And please be respectful and to avoid replicating societal prejudices and inequalities in this session. And with that, we hand over to our session co-organizers.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was really awesome. As want to just recognize the amazing organizing work that ERO has been putting together so far. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to hold this session on behalf of myself and my co-host Shahana. Thank you. Shahana, perhaps you'd like to join me up here as we introduce ourselves.
Thank you, Sam.
So my name is Samantha, and I'll introduce Shahana first. Shahana is an explorer of emergence, sense-making, and thrivability in a complex, ambiguous world. An experienced facilitator and collaboration coach, Shahana researches and embodies systems thinking and regenerative principles.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, ERO, for this platform. I'd like to introduce Samantha Suppier. She's a trickster in training, an alchemist, a systems navigator, and a creative disruptor, manifesting as a design strategist for sustainability and regeneration. She weaves and curates South-South regenerative dialogues and holds space for leadership and design.
Thank you, Shahana. So we'll be your session host for now. And to start off with, we wanted to tell you what Possible Futures is about. Possible Futures is really a set of dialogues, a way for us to talk about issues that are pertinent to the Global South when it comes to regeneration. There's a whole movement at the moment working towards planetary regeneration that is very dominated by Global North narratives and stories. We see this as a form of re-colonization, where there's a lot of people who want to find out about regeneration are reading all of these articles and stories that are written by especially white male folk in the Global North. And so this is our response of creating our ways of telling stories, dialogues, not letters, not articles, not a whole bunch of fancy books, but rather through inviting people into dialogues. And so the Global South Women's Forum is really the perfect place for us to do that, and we're so excited to do that here. The topic that we selected for today is intergenerational work towards the pluriverse. And for the next hour and a bit, we are actually going to be taking you into an interactive discussion together with our panel discussion that was pre-recorded because we wanted to include people in Brazil, really grab as much as possible of the Global South as we can. So for today, what you'll also be invited to participate in is some audience reflections that we have prepared for you guys. So there is a mural and also a Google document. We'll be pasting the links in the chat soon. And for those watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see them only here. So please take note of them at the moment. It's bit.ly/GSWF-PF mural and bit.ly/GSWF-PF doc. Now with this font, it looks like everything is in caps, but actually everything is in small letters. So please use those links and they'll take you to the audience reflections resources that we have prepared for you. Shahana, maybe you'd like to now lead us into the topic of discussion for today.
Thanks, Sam. So the topic is, as you've seen, intergenerationality and pluriversality. And we believe that both coexist. They cannot be separated. The divide between generations is very much a social construct, a manifestation of the age of separation, arising out of a need for individual space, but also a need that was projected or imposed by neoliberal capitalism and rising globalization. However, the pandemic, and even prior to the pandemic, we have been experiencing how deeply interconnected, intertwined, and interwoven this world is. And the concept of intergenerationality is a necessary aspect of that weaving, of that living world. And our ancestors, the yet to be born, and the future, and our present, live in a flowing web of life. We also have to remember and pay respect to the ancestors that are beyond human, that are an integral part of our intergenerationality. So in this celebration of life, in every act and every decision and every choice arising from a deep sense of interbeing, we invite you to listen to our dialogues, to participate in our dialogues, and to hold the concept of intergenerationality and pluriversality, a world where many worlds exist together in your heart and in your soul, as we weave this 1.5 hours and co-create this 1.5 hours of dialogue together. So with that, let's step into the first dialogue.
Thank you, Shahana. Transitioning from our live event, we're now in the pre-recorded version of the panel where we have with us Christina, Hawa, and Camilla. And introducing our first prompt will be Lua. Lua, please.
Hello, everyone. We will start with a layering of worlds. When we talk about co-creating possible future, the intergenerational work is a subject continuously present. We see a need to shift from the vision of layering of worlds, where layers of new worlds are created generation after generation, with the generation of now constantly cleaning the mess of previous generations. Instead of cleaning, we would be better composting and fertilizing. Building possible futures involves not only layering, but overlapping, where life is continually folding on itself. Like in a rope where the fibers twist gives it strength, where past and future generations become entangled. Building possible future involves weaving the wisdom of the past with the curiosity of the new, where worlds are continually becoming. So my first question for our guests is, how do you see the importance of this entanglement of different perspectives, experiences, sensitivities of different generations in order to, with the diversity and resilience needed to co-create possible future?
Of course, it's critically important, because the might of a nation is its ability to tell its stories and be able to follow on its thread. And I think particularly in the global South and with our history, of slavery, colonization, patriarchy, in our instance in South Africa about apartheid, that a disconnect was created and we struggled with the sense of identity and being able to shape a sustainable future. So if we want to live the might of our life and be complete, wholesome human beings, it's so important for us to be plugged in and have the connectivity of the different generations. And if we look at what COVID has done, it's brought the disruption, and the disruption is actually, you can say, a transformative intervention in connecting us. If you look at the time that families have spent in togetherness, a mother, father, grandparents, children, neighbors in together, and that created the space for stories to be shared, for memories to be remembered, etc. So if we want to build a new type of future and reimagine a new society, that thread is critical, because there's so much of knowledge. If you look at indigenous knowledge systems, our history, not through the prism of the West, but the history that's spoken and shared with authenticity, integrity, etc. So I would say yes, that the intergeneration, of the past, present, to shape the future is absolutely critical.
Well, I think one of the issues that we have today is that there's always this constant need to kind of create ruptures and create revolutions and recreate the world with every generation. Like I'm technically a millennial, like a slightly older millennial, but a millennial all the same. And even before us, the baby boomers, the greatest generation, the silent generation, and Gen X, etc., like that separation, that generational divide created by the idea that elders and young people live in different worlds is itself a construct, and we all exist in a shared space. And I feel like that's something that we've kind of forgotten. And creating an intergenerational, like just accepting that we share space, that we can make space together with one another, regardless of whether you're 80 years old or 80 years old. And 80 or 8, sorry, I'm not sure if that was clear. But like, to understand and accept that your difference is what makes your experiences beautiful, like bringing that together with the idea that despite the fact that one is a grandparent and one has only just started to discover certain very important things about their bodies, for example, if they've just entered puberty. And that kind of nurturing, that co-nurturing that happens when there's an acceptance of a person learning to become with another person regardless of age, I feel is important. The kind of settling into the present and accepting that there is a present instead of sticking to narratives of separation. I think that, for one, will help us understand that the future is already where we are. And for another, help us to be a lot more intentional about how we build that future, because we know where we are and who we are and who we are with. And we see each other. And in that seeing, there's a kind of fullness of being. I don't know if I'm becoming too philosophical here, but if you see another person, whether I'm looking at my father or I'm looking at my cousin who's 15 years old, they are human beings and I can learn from them. And that's the only way we can actually move as a species, I think, when we understand that we are all people. And I think Camilla especially will have some very important things to say. Congratulations on your new baby, Camilla.
Thank you. Thank you all. Very good to be here with you. Yeah, I was just adding to what you said, because I totally agree with points of view that were brought until now, but just to bring also some little bit of contradiction and thinking that one of the things that we should be able to do in order to move to diverse and pluriverse and diverse futures. Actually, we should be able to hold these contradictions together and not only try to get into one way of thinking and one way of seeing how change can unfold, right? So yeah, it made me think about how actually we have to be able to hold space for all the violence, for all the colonial violence and also other kinds of violence that has been happening and still happens right now. So not to put these things in the past, but also acknowledging that in the past a lot happened and we still haven't been able as a society, as a global community, to grieve enough about it and to mourn and to understand what the space of grieving can bring us. I don't know, I don't have an answer for that. And I don't even know actually an objective reason why to hold space for that, but it's just a sense in my heart when connected to a global community, as I feel when I'm here with you, that we have to hold space for that. We cannot just keep moving forward, right? As modernity tells us to all the time. Just let's move forward, let's build some kind of other future, let's build something better together. And maybe this is all a kind of modern colonial project still, because it's based on humans defining, deciding, planning, and acknowledging like that they can actually step into this better world in the future. And I see that there might be some kind of trap in this way if we are still thinking from inside the box of modernity, right? So yeah, what we do now as a collective in the work that we do is to try to recalibrate ourselves, recalibrate our sensitivities, to be able to listen in other layers and understand things in our bodies and to be able to actually let things sink in our bodies in other ways. And then we'll be opening space for building other futures together. And also about the intergenerational work, I would like to point out that sometimes it's not as linear as we would think. Like it's not like past, present, and future, right? It's all at the same time, because things happen in this, and in this sense, I already see a pluriverse going on because a lot of things happen in the same time. So we are sort of living different historical moments in the same time. Usually when we learn, we put them in a linear stages. And when we talk about, for example, traditional knowledge, we are saying, oh, that was from the past. And actually, no, it's still here. A lot of people live in different ways now. So it's not because the mainstream lives in one way that other things doesn't happen at the same time. So also looking to intergenerational concept as something to weave together in the present with a lot of different cultures. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Beautiful, Mila. Thank you. Our next question, it's about taking we seriously. For the Ubuntu philosophy, the community is logically and historically prior to the individual. And for that reason, it has the primacy over this, according to the South African philosopher Mogobe Ramosi. This community, he explains, is a dynamic entity between three spheres, that of the living, that of the ancestors, and that of those not yet born. This philosophy emphasizes the vital importance of taking we seriously. For you, how do you feel the relationship between this idea of we by Mogobe Ramosi that defies Western capitalistic logic and this intergenerational care and solidarity? Hawa, you can start.
Thank you very much, Ro, and it's a very pertinent question. I'll start by saying that with the flow of our breath and with our natural instinct, we actually, as people in the South, we are we. But because of our history, a history brought an I, and that history brought a value to disturb the we. Because if you look in our traditional systems, everything is about circles, circles of women, circles of elders, circles of wisdom, in which the center has been about storytelling, etc. So what the philosopher says, Magosi says, about the living ancestors and the future, that's how historical societies and traditional societies have lived. And Camilla will share more about how they still do, and they probably will continue to do. So there has been a rupture in the way we have lived, but we've seen in societies where they've been more communal that the collective has brought the caring and the sharing, that you don't even have to be a victim of modern diseases like loneliness. Like having to always think that I have to fight my way through life. And also we've seen the importation of our knowledge systems by the West, and institutionalizing and trademarking it and bringing it back to us as an individual construct. So we have to take more seriously, and so this whole journey of what we're talking about is really about the reclaimed self, to take us collectively to the we of the circle, and then the intergenerational sharing. And that intergenerational sharing will help us as people of the South to actually build the might of our own society and communities. And then if we reclaim ourselves, we actually are able to reclaim our place in our regions and in the world and the universe as well. But the construct of isolation and individualism, it also brings in the superficiality of materiality and just about pure capitalism. And pure capitalism by itself removes all forms of social and intergenerational constructs. And I'm sure Christina and Camilla can share with us more on this way of existing and the experiences in the work they've done out there. Thank you.
I think, especially when taking the term we, there are very many different ways that we can, that our respective languages take the term we. We is an English word, but at the same time, it still encapsulates a plurality of selfhood. And it speaks of a selfhood that is that belongs to a tradition of selves, and that's a beautiful thing that I think the global North also needs to remember for themselves, instead of taking and taking and taking and taking from the people that they've colonized. And in the Philippines, where I am, there is a word that is very popular, especially among circles, regenerative circles and Philippine psychology. It's called kapwa, the I in we, the I in you, and the I in other, basically, where you are, the you-ness is also within them, and so you are not alone. And when you say that someone is your kapwa, you're saying that you are embedded among them. And it's a term that can be abused, but it's very useful to this particular kind of discourse, especially since we are talking about trying to reclaim a self that had been destroyed or well, violated in very many different ways, in the present, in the past, and very possibly in the future. In fact, almost certainly in the future, because nothing's really changed as far as the a lot of the things that are going on. I mean, some refuse to even acknowledge that there are some messed up things going on still, and that the colonial project continues apace. but that's another story. But yeah, we, and like taking we seriously and acknowledging that the community is just as important, not more important, but just as important as the individual, needs to be a part of the conversation we have as peoples of the global south, precisely because the self that we have had been taken away from us and devalued, and we had been dehumanized. So I think if we continue to generate this kind of understanding that we are not, it's not like this big triangle with humans at the very top and men at the very top of the very top, etc., etc. We start to understand that we are part of a network. We are part of a very complex, interwoven, mixed up creature that is very much alive and beautiful and wonderful and terrible and just so complex. And understanding that complexity and sitting with the fact that there will always be internal contradictions in the fact that the self and the other are separate and yet the same needs to be very much a part of the it needs to be a part of the little voice in the backs of our heads, so that we don't forget that we're not that we should not repeat the sins of our ancestors. And when I say our ancestors, it acknowledges that yes, people of the global south, peoples of the global south have been colonizing themselves and each other also. And it's not just a north-south dichotomy, but rather a continuing process of domination and destruction that we cannot help but take part in, simply because our humanity is embedded in a kind of violence that can be taken a little bit too far when it's denied the space that it needs to breathe and be itself.
Cheers, thank you for that. So that was the first part of our pre-recorded panel discussion. And my internet isn't good, so I probably did drop out earlier. But I would like to make sure as well that we tell you who these amazing women are who are speaking in this panel here. I'll start by introducing Lua, who was the moderator in our recorded session. Lua is from Brazil. She is a dialogic regenerator and a co-founder of Futuro Possível, which is an educational collective for planetary regeneration, operating in the space between the old world and the new world, the old narratives and the new narratives. Shahana.
Camila Cardoso from Brazil is a member of the collective Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures and co-founder of Terra Adentro. Camila explores systemic transition and possibilities of decolonial perspectives, focused on social justice and well-being, intertwined with the living earth. Hawa Bibi Khan from South Africa is a universal consciousness being, dedicated to the service and transforming values and existing models of business and partnerships. She is a pioneer and leader in the alternative investments, consciousness capital, international partnerships, and facilitation and humanitarian development arena. Over to you, Sam. Looks like Sam is frozen. So I'll just introduce Christina before we move on to the second part. Christina Sason seeks truth in environmental justice, gender equality, and indigenous rights. In her studies on sociocultural anthropology and anthropologies of sustainability, Christina believes that human diversity and altruism are the keys to our continued survival as a species on this beautiful, finite planet.
Cheers, Shahana. Just a quick reminder that this is being live streamed, it's being recorded, and it will be up at the EROR YouTube channel as well. So before we go into our first breakout room, and we hope that you'll all join us there in conversation with each other, we would like to show you a little, it's a little, but it's a very important art project called This Is Not the Truth. This is a project that Camila and Maria Clara Parente made together as a collective, talking about the civilization of separation that we are in today. Rachel, would you like to play video 2, please? Thank you.
We humans are immersed in a great ecological, social, political, and economic crisis. Everyone knows that. It is perceived every day. This crisis is also the triumph of models and systems that see nature as an infinite resource, models that seek only profit as an end, favoring the wealthy over the poor. However, this whole system is based on the idea that a piece of paper is worth something, and it does. This is because we created a collective belief that we can make these trades. In the same way we created this very powerful belief, we can also create other collective beliefs that make more sense in this century and take into account the never before seen risk of the extinction of our own species. Many scholars defend the idea that this moment we live in is a transition to a more collaborative and less selfish world, where people understand more deeply that there is no separation between the humankind and nature. All living beings are relational and part of the web of life. And that's why everything seems so chaotic and confusing now. That's because the models and associations we still use to see reality are linear and make no room for what is mystical and unexplainable. The last great revolution of Western thought was in the Enlightenment period, and the ways of thinking that were innovative at that time guide our institutions to this day. This intellectual movement took place in the 18th century, yes, a long time ago. It is as if our collective body realizes that it's time for change. John Locke, Adam Smith, Descartes, Bacon, and Newton. These were some of the pioneers of the Enlightenment. It is worth remembering, therefore, that all these thinkers were white and European men. But what is this mind shift about? We used to see the world as a machine, but now we are realizing that planet Earth is a living organism, just like us, humans. Everything is entangled. What underpins the idea of relating our institutions and systems to machines? Where does this thought come from? This way of thinking comes mainly from the Newtonian Cartesian paradigm, which arose at that time, which says that to know the whole, one needs to divide it into parts, and that the planet functions as a machine. And as a machine, it is assumed that parts can be replaced or repaired. This system of thinking led us to find short-sighted solutions to urgent problems, such as treating pain with medicine that causes several other pains, choosing a profession that in the short term gives you money, but in the long run makes you sick, or use plastic because isolating other factors is the cheapest and most practical material, although it takes time to decompose and ends up in the stomach of a sea turtle. This chain of ideas, which excludes intuition, ancestral knowledge, and feeling, is limiting our experience and making us sick. Seeing the world within the paradigm of complexity, a view that began to develop in the last century, seems to be the key to question the logic of the system. How can we engage in making other ways of life possible? How can we open up our imagination so other ways of living can emerge? The transition must be collective since everything is so interconnected. It demands a sense of unity. What affects me also affects the person on the other side of the world, no matter how small the impact might be. If progress depends on cutting more trees, we should go the other way. How are we going to hear the earth with deafening earphones? What do we not want to hear? If the system we live in is failing for so many of us, why do we still insist on it? If the earth is a living organism and we are all part of it, environmental crisis is a part of our failure as a species. How can other earth stories emerge through us? We don't have much time. We need to listen to our planet. Only we can do that.
As we take a moment's silence and breathe in to absorb what was said, I would like to invite everyone to reflect on the question. In a world that is striving to keep us separate, that is trying very hard to make us feel as isolated individuals, how do we experience intergenerational entanglement in our lives? I'll also post it so as we get ready for the breakout rooms. This is a prompt I'm inviting everyone to reflect and speak about. I'm also posting the prompt in the chat.
And just to note that the prompt is also accessible within our mural and Google document. And with that, we'll go into our breakout room shortly. I believe we're going to be sorted into 5 people a room. And if possible, Hawa and Chris, who are also here, it would be amazing if you could join us back in the main room so that we can continue our discussions here for the live stream. Yes, and just to note that we will indeed be sharing all the resources at the end of our session. So Rachel, would you be able to open the breakout rooms, please? Just noting that Shahana has now posted the prompt in the Zoom chat, and it's also accessible in the Google Doc as well as the mural. Oh yes, so we will be going into breakouts for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back to regroup for the last 5 minutes before we move on to the second half of our session. Thank you. So would Christina, Shahana, and Hawa please not join a breakout room? You'll be seeing a prompt right now probably, and just don't click the blue button. But everyone else, please do, and go in dialogue and have a great time, and leave us your reflections in the Google Doc and the mural as well, so we can capture them. Nice. So Christina and Hawa, you're both here live joining us. I'm not sure if Hawa, you're able to join us
Sorry,
on
Samantha,
YouTube.
just to let you know that this is continuously live streamed. So
Yep.
this your conversation will be live streamed.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so what we wanted to hold space for while everyone's in breakout rooms holding their own dialogues on what has just been densely packed shared in our first half of the session.
Uh-oh. I think Sam just froze. She'll
She
be
wasn't
back
in
in a
the panel.
moment. So, Chris,
Yes.
there, she's back. Yeah, carry on, Sam.
No, you go for it. So I'd love to hear what you and Chris both have in terms of reflections.
Yeah. I would actually like to invite Chris to share what you felt about the dialogue so far, and then we'll come in with ours.
I think because I'm rehearing it again, I'm kind of realizing that there are a lot of things that need to be said and made explicit, like how, for instance, it's this interweaving and this attempt to kind of try to make us come together is not an attempt to rupture an existing system, but rather an attempt to heal systems that had been written over by shall we say, rather more predatory systems. And I feel that that was something that maybe I forgot to mention, and that may need to be kind of brought up again and again, because we are peoples of the global south and we have been wronged deeply. And at the same time, that doesn't make us, like the holy goddess of victims and or any of that, because we are still, at the end of the day, people who are still going to have to sit in our own griefs and in our own mistakes and in our own sins. And in the question of, in a world that is striving to keep us as separate and isolated individuals, how do we experience intergenerational entanglement in our lives? That for one is a very beautiful question. And all I can say about that is it starts with us appreciating the people around us. I really think, especially if we have there has to be some disclaimers, because it is an unfortunate part of people's lives that there are people who live in abusive situations or highly, shall we say, toxic ones. And there are many different ways of expressing that toxicity or abusiveness. But for those of us who are fortunate enough to live in an environment of love and togetherness, despite the many flaws that we ourselves and the people around us have, there is great merit in looking at the person beside you and saying, I see you. And whether that person is an elder, whether that person is a little baby, just seeing them and saying, you and I, we're the same, and I acknowledge that. I think it's a very crucial first step to kind of claiming ourselves and claiming our pasts. And Sahada, I'd like to throw it back to you as well.
I love what you say, Chris, and going back to your concept of kapwa and Ubuntu, and when I'm from India, we say namaskar, which literally translates to my soul sees your soul and bows to that. And then when we talk about intergenerationality, And the more I've been listening to our dialogues and rehearing the conversation that we had yesterday, and sort of sensing it not from my head but from my heart, but and deeper within, it feels almost dichotomous to talk about pluriversality without intergenerationality. You cannot. And intergenerationality to me goes beyond human. I mean, we are carrying 4.5 billion years of being on this planet in our DNA in different forms, whether as a fungi or whether as a tree or a mammal. We have evolved to this form, but we didn't come on this planet as separate individuals as we would like to believe, as science and the age of enlightenment and rationalization would have us believe. And hence, I feel that there has been, as a part of colonization, a very concerted effort to also uproot and unroot us from our ancestry. Because only when we are unrooted and uprooted and kind of, floating in the sea of floating in isolated bubbles, then we become scared, fearful, and then can we be manipulated to do what a power, more privileges and power would have us do. Having said that, and like you rightly said, we are not this holy martyrs. We also are individuals and human beings and societies and communities who have made our own mistakes, who have to acknowledge and sit in our own grief and heal from the place of grieving before we can move forward. And accepting of intergenerationality as another, I would say, fractal of pluriversality, and where, again, like I say, our ancestry goes back to beyond human, is a necessary part of that entanglement, that whether you call it interbeing, interconnectedness, or we are part of the sentient beings and we are part of this planet. We are as much I'm what and I guess a shift from the Anthropocene worldview of us in control of the planet to us being a part of the planet, like another oak tree, like a fungi, like the mycorrhizal network. We are part of that deep global network of all sentient beings inhabiting this finite planet. And we have to respect that. We have to embody that if we have to heal and move on to a different regenerative future.
I noticed Hawa's still here. Hawa, what do you think?
I'm sure if she's able
Hi,
to.
hi, Christina. Sorry, I was having connectivity problems, but I'm shifting from one. Let me try again now. Okay, hello. I think I'd like to bring the perspective about humanity. We're struggling with challenges of social justice, power justice, intergenerational justice, economic justice, ecological security, food security. So how does the conversation about possible futures, intergeneration, factor all of that in, knowing that we coming from the global south, from developing and emerging economies, that every day our sense of our human rights is being affected because these are the not enough care is given to these challenges. Every day in South Africa, we are having a deepening sense of social injustices. You know, we didn't even speak about issues like corruption, etc., which challenges South Africa. It probably challenges most of our global South countries. And how does that impact the wholeness, the value of our lives, of our household, of our communities, etc. You know, so whilst we're shaping this future, we're still challenged with the historical injustices in our society. You know, so that's where I'll leave it for now.
Thanks, Hawa. Thank you for that very important perspective. And to add a bit to what you have said and what Chris also said, I think when we talk about all these challenges and then we talk about a pluriversal world, pluriversality and intergenerationality, it's about seeing these challenges from the perspective of a world that can hold multiple worlds in it. So right now, perhaps one of the things that is happening is the challenges have been brought into focus in a certain manner, quote unquote, which is sort of, mainstreamed through a set of narratives. And we are being sort of guided, let's say, by different narratives, by the media, by the government, by different whatever bodies with the voices out there, to focus on the challenges in a particular way, where we are probably also at risk of missing out on those hidden narratives. Hidden narratives, not because they are voiceless, but because we are not being shown those voices. They are becoming unseen, unheard, and unsaid. Precisely what we are trying to, highlight through these kinds of dialogues. And hence the challenges also become a set of challenges with a set of solutions which appear to be global or universal or appear to be solutions when they are not. They are just a set of lenses through which to view those challenges, where many, many other lenses are not being used or being deliberately avoided. And that's where, when we talk of intergenerational work, it's also about bringing back into perspective generations, bringing back into perspective the interconnectedness, and bringing back into the mainstream, quote unquote, bringing back into the narratives those perspectives that can help us to gain, I would say, for the lack of a better word, a more holistic, a deeper systems sensing, not only systems thinking, but a systems sensing from a different consciousness level, from a different level of deeper, much deeper acceptance than we currently have.
Sahana, if I can come in and
Yes.
just add a little bit more in terms of this word called algorithm. Data, what impact? I mean, we talk about storytelling, and then we have storytelling versus data in the 4IR world that we're living in. And how is that data disrupting? I wouldn't use the word, actually disruption can be a positive word. It's disturbing the thread of how we're shaping as humans, because someone is shaping us through this construct of algorithms. And what are we going to do in shaping our possible futures about being a key custodian and participant in those algorithms? Because the algorithm, I mean, we're living in the background now, and we're preparing ourselves, and we're already in the midst of living with AI. How does all of that, these are our realities and what we're living with every day. How does all of that disturb what we are seeking in terms of reclaiming and reconnecting with intergenerations. So does where we come from get silenced, becomes technologically obsolete, and when we become a human version of an AI? So this is what I'm just placing in our midst, because whilst we're talking a lot of our oppressions, there's another form of control and oppression that is taking place. And we need to have the mindfulness and the awareness of how all of that, we're becoming a human that we didn't plan for, and we haven't given our conscious consent.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Hawa. Very, very critical and important perspective about data that can be manipulated, and hence the importance of bringing, highlighting those unheard stories, those unsought, unheard voices through stories. And hence the need for spaces like this, for more such dialogues, which highlight those stories above data. Because data is not everything. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I mean, where does wisdom fall into all of this? How do we get shaped as complete, multi-dimensional humans? Or are we just going to be a product?
I think in the parlance of maybe academe and in a lot of other shall we say positivistic, objective areas of exchange, wisdom would come in through qualitative research, which is to say the generation of narrative, the discovery of narratives and the generation of narratives within the different fields that we have. So this is especially important in social science research, I think. And I think as far as whether or not we're becoming ourselves just kind of human AIs, I don't think that's ever going to happen, because as someone of the 21st century, I think all of us already know how ridiculously unpredictable humanity is and how silly we can be. And it kind of it seems to me that there's, if we are conscious, if we are aware, and in like we allow ourselves to be intuitive about interacting with technology, interacting with the kind of meta level of technology that I personally don't understand because I'm not a computer scientist. And we are insistent always of just upending existing power structures and disrupting the status quo, and always challenging and challenging and challenging. I think we can definitely make our possible futures possible. And that's all. Thank you.
So Hannah, if I can just this thing, it's that, we use the entanglement. We are in a space of entanglement of jargon, fads, a superficiality. So if we connect with our ancestral lineage and history and knowledge systems, simple things like listening, awareness, presence, you know, those that connect, and the balance and the integration of who we are within ourselves and how we are outside ourselves and how we connect and integrate with all that is around us. You know, so the thing about this, the simplicity of being human, away from the clutter and away from the entanglement. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sahana.
Sorry, just to interrupt. We need to go now into our second video recording. We don't have time to go into a little break, which is what we wanted. So Rachel, please, if you can start that off for us.
If I can just follow on what Christina was saying about Kapwa. Of course, in Africa, we have Ubuntu. You know, and Ubuntu is everything about the circle and the one being in the other and the other being in the one, and the collective are in each other, you know. And we have gone through a journey in the last few decades to reclaim our sense of Ubuntu beyond what was political activism and seeking independence in our countries. And the next I'll share is in terms of the concept of ancestor. We have a history of missionaries coming into our continents and our countries. And of course, with that came the instrument of faith, which has now become integrated in our way of life. But what in the African context is that the missionaries placed a lot of emphasis on being disconnected to ancestors because they saw it as idol worshipping or God worshipping in the human. Whilst they themselves have been strong in connecting to their ancient knowledge and wisdom and to their history and culture, they then created a religious construct to the issue of ancestors and us being connected to our ancestors. And that's why in terms of intergenerational work, there's more work that we need to do to reclaim and understand. Well, firstly, to understand what is ancestry and ancestor connecting, you know, so that we can have that flow and the connect in our history to then be more centered persons in the now, and then to take that thread into the future. And there's not enough conversations that are being held about the issue of ancestry, because how do we own ourselves in our DNA in totality if we don't have the connect with what shapes us in how we eat, what our preferences are in how we look, or what we choose, and what comes naturally with our instincts, because it disturbs our intuition, our gut feeling, at our physiological level, at how our cells get nourished, etc. And this is just a beautiful illustration of how the depth and the extent of maybe even thousands of years of disconnect that has taken place. And I mean, if you just follow what is written there in terms of, you know, in order to be born, you need 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second grade, and you go on and go on. And where we are now at the generation of 2048 ninth great-grandparents, if those of us that have that, you know. And also it's like, you know, if you think for the moment, how many struggles, how many battles, how many difficulties, how much sadness, how much happiness, how much love stories, how many expressions of hope for the future. I mean, if you look at, if we just take this illustration, and if you take the British monarchy, or if you take the Rothschilds family, etc., that they have been able to weave generation after generation and be able to build the might of their family and their communities and their nations. And then we've just had a few hundred years where someone came and just nipped that off, you know, and we disconnected from our umbilical cord, and then we're always in a catch-up mode as opposed to a self actualization mode. Now, I know it's not possible, but we need to have the consciousness and the mindfulness, and that's why the importance of actually connecting to our roots and to the indigenous knowledge system and making it an important knowledge body that becomes a center for the current generation, the millennials, the Luas and the Christinas, and for the future generations of Camilla's little baby, Nada, etc.
there's a social cartography that we work with in the collective, in the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures collective, that sort of goes into that way, and I would just like to share about it briefly. So it's sort of an invitation to see ourselves as a broader self, and the image that we invite to see ourselves in a funny and playful way is a bus. So imagine you are like a whole bus full of people in this bus. And then sometimes you sort of know who is the driver. The driver is someone that maybe you identify as an I, but you know there's always these other voices, right? The voice is back in the bus, the voice is in the middle, and the voice is just beside the driver. That is that constant voice that is always telling you something. So this first layer of the bus is the I layer. And then imagine those like British buses of like decks that have decks, different floors in the bus. And so the next layer is the layer of the me and you. So is when we have the I and the other people. So you understand that their voices are also in our bus. So in order to be me and to be an activist or to be trying to build different futures, I'm always in touch and exchanging and weaving with other people. And then the third layer is the me in you. So we understand how entangled we are actually, and how I am inside of other people and in other beings actually. So this you being other than human as well. So it's actually an expanded I, it's an expanded me, right? That becomes this we. And then the last layer of this bus, of this decade bus, is neither me nor you. So it's when we are actually able to understand and to erase the boundaries, to let those boundaries that separate me from you just to melt. So we are able to actually be a more entangled and united we. So yeah, there was another story that came to my mind when I was listening to you. That's when last year I was doing some work with the Pitaguari people in the northeast coast of Brazil. It's an ancient indigenous people from Brazil that are still alive and flourishing and doing a lot of things, and they have a very long traditional knowledge also still alive with them. And after a 4-day workshop, like a pedagogical research workshop, we opened a circle and closing circle just for people to share what were their feelings and how they felt through this process and what was more important for each of them. So something that is really usual in Western kind of teaching and studying, right? We open circle and we share our feelings. And everyone, there was most indigenous people and some researchers from outside of the village. And mostly everyone started talking about, and they started the sentence literally with the word we. So they were all the time talking about like how they all have learned something and how they all have some things to actually develop and how the community was impacted by that. And then I was like, oh my God, they're just not saying the word I, like it was not in the vocabulary. And I started to think to myself, like, how can I express myself in that way? Like, who is this we that I might be able to talk about? And then I started to be like really nervous when my time, when it was almost time for me to talk, because I couldn't identify what was the we that I could talk about. That was the first thing. And I wasn't there, like I couldn't say in terms of this we that they were saying. And it was just so beautiful. And I felt really like ashamed in a way of not being able to connect myself in that layer. Like, I mean, I work with that, I'm conscious about that, I understand mentally about that, but then I just acknowledged that was still not in my body. So one thing that I'd like to bring up for us here, for us and for whoever is watching us later, is that how sometimes maybe we can be tricking ourselves into thinking that, oh, I'm super entangled and I know what's this we about, and it's so much more important to be in this sense of belonging and togetherness, right, than in my closed I self. but actually, like, are we already existing in this mode? Are we able to really feel it? Or are we still trapped in our minds, telling ourselves that that we can be this broader we? So what kind of exercises can we actually do that will move and shift things inside of us? So maybe we can gesture towards this kind of acknowledging and understanding about the world. So yeah, again, just to sort of like, sometimes I think it's useful to doubt ourselves in a way, like, am I really there? Like, do I really understand that in a deeper way? Or am I just able to explain it rationally? That's one step. Other steps are still very unknown and very difficult.
Humans is
For
not
sure.
our only ancestor, and the we is not only the human. Our ancestors is all of what is creation and life and non-life from the beginning of the universe. So our intergenerational work and creating that possible futures is an integration and convergence of all of the totality of the universe. So thank you, Camilla, for sharing that and bringing this conversation back to our intergenerational connection. Thank you, Lua.
Thank you, Helen. Moving towards this mutual understanding in the pluriverse. Pluriversality is a concept that I learned from Mogobe Hamosi, this South African philosopher that I mentioned before. And he says, he speaks about this idea of universe that we embody it, a world where we have a center and margins. And he defines this idea saying that we are not a universe, we are a pluriverse, where is no center and no margin. So when we talk about pluriversality, we are talking about a world that happens in multitude, in different manifestations at the same time, being and producing different kinds of knowledge. So in practice, this would mean a polydialogue of cultures and traditions, no hegemony. So how do you believe that we can move towards local autonomy and an intercultural philosophy that promotes this mutual understanding and the defense of human life in a world in collapse? Is that possible?
Perhaps the question to ask is, in understanding the pluriverse, are we experiencing it from our left, logic, mental, analytical side, or we are experiencing it from a deep part of our heart, soul, and spirit? And if we're experiencing, I think, the pluriverse from, if we take the construct that the heart and soul is our center, and we draw on whatever other that we require to function to be whole, then the concept of the pluriverse and being possible, yes, it's absolutely where it will lead to sustainability as opposed to destruction. But if we're thinking of pluriverse from the logic and still having to grapple with the construct of the I and the we, then it will lead to the superficiality, materialism, the war, the destruction, and then the constant need for revolution and countering all of this. I don't know what my friends here on the panel feel, but that's what my instinctual thing about thinking of the pluriverse, and that's where I probably would start.
I come from an archipelago, and so the concept of a center is ridiculous to me. Like the idea that there should be like a mainland is really silly, but politically that's how colonial rule was imposed on us. So even though I'm from Bacolod City, which is in the center of the archipelago, everyone looks towards Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines, and that's a construct that does not follow the geographical shape of the creature thing that is the idea of a Filipino nation or a Filipino people. And that in itself is a construct that was generated by the colonial experience, and it's turtles all the way down. If I'm to quote Clifford Geertz, I think. And we are already in a pluriverse. It's just that some of those layers are bigger, louder, thicker, and hungrier than other layers. And some of those worlds are predatory. And I feel like that's something that we haven't quite come to grips with yet as people from the global north and the global south together. But especially the people of the global north. No offense meant, all offense meant. I'm sorry, guys. There is an idea of the sacred here that speaks of everything being holy, of everything belonging not to oneself, but belonging to what is numinous, what is beyond the self. And it manifests in many, many different ways. And I feel like that is kind of the sort of pluriverse that I think we can sort of gesture towards, that could help us prevent the more predatory of the worlds that we live with and live in from creating this kind of plantation ecosystem, I guess, where only one kind of person can live, only one kind of economy can exist, only one ideology is possible. Like that's because that's not how it is. Everybody needs to have a voice, and yet everybody also needs to be able to sit in their own silence, and that can only happen if everybody's allowed their own worlds, and that has not happened for very many of us, for very many of our peoples. And I'm not just talking about the fact that my peoples are, in fact, yeah, like there are at least 120 different ethnicities in the Philippines alone. And it's all being subsumed under the concept of, you know, like one, isang lahi, isang lipi, one people, one race. And it's just like, that's so silly, but that's the kind of modern, progressive idea that seems to continue to be pushed by a lot of governments and a lot of think tanks.
Just in terms of again, just with what you're sharing, it's just triggered the thought of, you know, do we live in a world of scarcity, or do we live in a world of abundance? And again, if we live in a world of abundance, the source is actually coming from the heart. And if we live in this, and that's the we. And then if we live in the space of the mind, and then there's the individualism, and that's where we have the scarcity. And if we take pluralism and bring it back to the intergenerational, you'll see that if we live with abundance, there is actually the comfort to be intergenerational, and to see the value and the wealth that comes from that. But when we operate from scarcity, it's like I can only take care of this generation, my nuclear family, or my nuclear self, and I cannot, because I operate from scarcity and individualism.
A lot of times we are still in our minds, so understanding sometimes means, do I rationally understand that? To try to center ourselves with the center of the earth in a way, as an image. So the invitation to move deeper, to go inside, both in ourselves, both inside this broader we that we were talking about previously, and inside the greater metabolism that we're all embedded in and are part of. And as we move inside, are we able to relate wider? So to relate to things in a wider sense. And maybe doing this movement, we can actually sense this pluriverse, and then we will be able to hold space for everything, for all the different cultures, for everything that needs to be respected. Because not only about things that happened in the past, we're living right now a lot of collapses, a lot of death. I mean, especially this year with the coronavirus pandemic all across the world. So we actually got this sense of community collapse, like global collapse altogether. So how can we learn from that, opening space for mourning and grieving together as we go through a present collapse and stay strong together in defense of all forms of lives?
I think the process of going deep within starts with acceptance, and starts ultimately with the fact that we are flawed, small, humble, and part of the dirt that we have been born from, and where we will probably be buried in, depending on what burial traditions you have. It's exceptionally humbling, and accepting that and seeing that we are all in the same situation, and accepting that that situation is that everything is just kind of crashing together anyway, whatever happens, kind of brings a sort of relief. And at the same time, it also opens us to that grief that Camilla talked about, and that I think also opens us to the grief that Hawa mentioned when Sam brought up the intergenerational math. It's I think to detect the pluriverse is to sit with the limitedness of the self, and to understand the grief that comes with that limitedness, while also accepting that there is more grief to come, because there is just there's so much loss. It's so painful, but at the same time, you see in that pain such profound beauty. And I think it brings us into that kind of understanding of the separateness and the profound tragedy of I not being we.
As part of healing, and as part of transformation, and as part of living in our magnanimity to go into the future, we acknowledge. And as part of that acknowledgement, we understand. And as part of the understanding, we go through a process of acceptance. And that acceptance brings an awareness. And the awareness is probably within ourselves, because we have a history of experiences and onslaught within us that creates triggers and makes us react and respond and get angry and sabotage, etc. So once we have that, but when we have that awareness, we actually are, and I speak from my context as a child of South Africa and as Africa, and where we've been reminded how small we are. We have been reminded, and it's been institutionalized, that we don't actually exist, we are not worthy, we can't be powerful, we can't be of value. So we are on a quest and on a journey, and this is all part of our intergenerational work, where we open and we start being possible, we embrace our magnanimity, and we live with possibilities and limitlessness, because that gives us the strength to actually pull ourselves up, not in a superficial left brain way, but from the heart about all is possible. And so from the sort of the acceptance is to have that openness. And then these are the things that take us to the pluriverse. Otherwise we'll be with negativity, and the negativity will bring anger, and the anger will bring destruction, and then we will perpetuate the narratives of what the global South has brought to us, that we can't build, and we can't construct, and we can't be with technology, and we can't advance, and we can't be a sustainable society. So with everything, if we want to create this possible future, we need the transformative disruption, but that takes us to consciousness that we exist with the lightness of being, and that all is possible for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawan. And before Sun finishes the session, I would like to make a final provocation for those who are watching, reinforcing what Camila said before, to allow ourselves to dive into ourselves and this larger planetary body, and allow ourselves to feel what was said here beyond our rational capacity. Because like she said, I think we need to relearn how to access all our layers, all our dimensions, and this is crucial for me. This is in the heart of what we are saying here. And of course, I would like to thank for the audience and the generosity of our speakers here. Thank you. I give the floor to Sam now. Thank you all.
To close out, let me take you back to quantum mechanics. String theory is a hypothesis that fundamental elements of nature, the things inside of atoms, vibrate with particular magnitudes of energy, different wavelengths, different frequencies. All things in the universe are simply a manifestation of frequencies expressing themselves. These fractals fundamentally express the pluriverse that we are naturally able to hold in every element of our being. It lies deep, deep within us, and perhaps most of us have strayed too far to be able to reach that deep. As has been throughout all of cosmic, biological, and cultural evolution, some things go extinct and some things evolve. Thank you all. We're now going to go into the final video as we close out this session. Rachel, please.
Forest has got such an incredible energy, and the trees are such amazing characters. The energies of the trees are very strong. It's an ancient connection that people had with nature. People that come to the forest, even skeptics, have had the most incredible experiences. People are transformed when they connect with the trees. The greatest thing that the trees taught me, it's all about love, looking out for each other rather than fighting against each other. Caring for the world around us, that is my deepest wish. I view the trees as earth angels that are looking after us, protecting us.
So just to wrap up today, I think the video said it all about intergenerationality and beyond humans and our connectedness to all sentient beings on this planet, to each other, and the interwoven interbeingness of everything. So just as there isn't anything much more beautiful that can be added than the messages we receive from trees about rootedness, about connectedness, and about thriving on this planet. So with that, I'll leave you with intergenerationality and pluriversality. and our ancestry that reaches back to 4.5 billion years. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ira. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.